Hello and welcome back to Drago's Tango Alley. This is Alejandro Drago, your host, and this is the video dedicated to Etude number 5 by Astor Piazzolla from his collection of 6 Tango Etudes for Solo Flute or Violin. It took me a little longer to start this video, although I intended to be among the shortest. The reason is that there is so much to say about this etude, and I'm afraid that if I started going into every detail, the video will be too long and too heavy to watch and to, get anything really useful out of it. So the main thing I would like to say at the very start of it is that I consider Etude number 5 among the most perfect compositions by Piazzolla. It may not be the most touching, the most emotional, the most memorable of them. It is rather short, it's just one page. So you can say a number of things, but I am firmly convinced that this is a model of his treatment of musical motifs. So I think that his art of motif weaving is at the top in this etude. So I created two sets of analysis. One is the overall formal and harmonic plan, and the other one is the motivic analysis with at least two motivic trees, after which I will present a couple of fingerings that are a typical concern of violinists. But before we go on with anything, and at the risk of being considered exaggerated in my statements or assertions or comparisons, I would like to say that while aware of the distances in scope and anything you want to write in here between Mozart's symphonies and Piazzolla's work, there is something common between this etude and the last movement of the Jupiter Symphony, the number 41, Köchel, if I'm not wrong, 551, by Mozart. And what is common is that in that symphony, in that movement of that symphony, Mozart managed to build an extended contrapuntal fabric based essentially on 6 motifs, very simple motifs that he developed into a true jewel of music. So without, of course, pretending to put Etude number 5 at the very same level as Mozart's Jupiter Symphony last movement, I would like to indicate that in inspiration, in approach, something similar is happening here, and Piazzolla goes about it in a very successful way. So in order for you to be able to draw your own comparisons and decide if you agree with me or not, and chiefly in order to further your education, I will put a very interesting analysis on the description section made by a very good YouTuber that created a beautiful and very instructive presentation. So without further ado, let's move on with the overall plan of the etude. Okay, so what you see here is an outline of the etude. The etude is in an ABA form. However, the contrast between these sections is neither tonal or tempo-wise. It has to do with the structure of those sections. That's the reason why I've listed the sections A and A apostrophe near to each other, and then the section B. So they are not in the order they appear, but it's going to be more clear for everybody if I do like this. So each of the three sections starts with a 2-bar A minor, 2-bar B flat major, and 2-bar A minor element. That element is virtually identical in the three sections, with the exception that in section B, it's briefly extended. We will see that in a different outline that I will offer, in which all the motifs appear. So if we now go to the section A, and its cognate A prima, then we see that it goes essentially the same for another 4 bars, but then it takes a different direction. In section A, we do an ascending tonal motion to A minor, whereas in section A apostrophe, we go down to E minor. So, and that dictates certain differences on how this proceeds on. Let me clean this. Yes. We have sections that are quite similar in their motifs, however the tonalities are different. And then in the initial exposition of A, we have these 4 bars here, which are a sort of tonal slide down from E7 to E flat 7, okay? That is more compacted here. It appears over the course of 2 bars in A apostrophe. Therefore, in order to maintain the parallelism, that word, of sections, I left some space here. There is nothing missing, it's just I wrote it that way because from this point on, as you can see on the screen, it lines up again, and both sections end up using what I have deemed motif E, or the motif of arpeggios. You cannot see it here, you will see it in the next outline, but this is a sequence of arpeggios that, while overall goes up, in terms of tonal center goes down. So both endings are similar. I suggest that after you see the next outline, you come back to this, maybe you put a stop and try to watch this on a computer screen, because there is a lot of little things there. But basically that's how sections A and A apostrophe work, okay? You can see more detail, as I said, if you go with a bigger screen and take your time. Section B, which strictly speaking goes here, right, because it happens between them two, starts identically with this extension that we will see in the next outline. It's just 2 beats extra. And interestingly, the ensuing section after this initial motif A, B, flat A, goes neither up like here or neither down like here, but goes up and down between the tonalities of E minor and D minor. So it's an interesting way of treating the tonal plan. All 3 sections start with the same motif, not motif exactly, although that too, but the same tonal gesture, right? And in A, it evolves up. In B, it fluctuates between 2 tonalities that won't appear practically on the other, on the rest of the piece. And then A prima goes down. Okay, so as usual, there is a lot more to say about this. But as I said, this is an outline to which you may want to come back. What I will do now, I will present you the same outline, but now indicating the tonalities with different colors, and that this has been done on excerpts of the score. So you can see also the melodic and intervallic motifs that appear. So let's switch to the next stage of the analysis. So this is what what I was referring to. This is the etude, and the section that you see now corresponds to the first line of the previous outline. This is the section A. Each tonality is marked okay, with a different color. I try to be consistent. Now you can see the correspondence between the motifs that we will analyze a little later, and the cells, rhythmic and intervallic cells, and the tonalities, okay, they appear in. So let's move to the next slide now. So this corresponds to the section B, and this is the expanded motif I referred to, as you see, is identical to, well, not absolutely identical, but say the tonal plan is followed, and there is this 2-beat expansion here. And also there is a motivic variation in the B flat major motif, but that doesn't change the fact that as a whole it starts as well with A minor, B flat major, and A minor. So there is an element of paraphrasis here, or if you want, of development. As I said, this is a very complex tapestry of motivic interweaving. So I wanted you to have this so that you can trace back the motifs that we will analyze in the context of the overall form. So let's go to the third slide now. So this is the third and final slide. You see it again here, the A minor, B flat major, A minor initial motif, okay, and the tonalities also corresponding to different colors, and you can see the motifs there. I just wanted to mention something I omitted to point out in the first of these 3 slides. There was an arpeggio that ends section A, as well as an arpeggio a little bit more extended that ends section A prima, which is, or A apostrophe, which is the one you're seeing now. And under both arpeggios, I put C motifs analysis, because it's just a question of space. There are way too many tonalities, and I just mark them in different shadows of gray to remind you that the tonality is going to change. However, we leave the analysis of those tonalities for when we address this motif in particular. So now that we have the outline, let's go to the most perhaps interesting part of this, which is the analysis of the motifs and how they connect to each other. Well, this is the beginning of the etude, and we have what I would call motif A, which seems to be like an embedded hemiola. We have this accent here and here plus the pause, so it creates like a 5/8 sensation, and it resumes here and ends here. This note is sort of shared between motif A and B. So we have this ta-da-ta-ta, ta-da-ta-ta, but the beat is still a 4/4, right? So how does this motif evolve? Well, one of the modifications or versions of this motif is one with stretto, with rhythmic stretto, right? So you have like a faster version of the pitch collection with, in fact, one added note to that collection. We will see this in the re-exposition, in which he uses this motif A in the stretto version, but through adding a different note, he gets a different harmony out of it. So, besides the stretto version, we have an expanded version. We have it here. and here in the B flat major section. As you see, this is the beginning of the big B section, right? So instead of having it in its standard rhythmic form, we have an expanded rhythmic value of some of the notes. And that is the expanded version of it. So then one more thing happens. We have what I call the reduplicated version, which is essentially an extended ending with a repeated note. Okay, so it repeats the note and then ends on a longer duration. We can see it again here. Okay, so if we count this the reduplicated motive, meaning that we duplicate a note, out of it we take this cell, the resolution cell, and it develops into a mini motive that appears here as a 3/8 hemiola, okay? Tatari, tatari, tatara. So this is like a derived cell or mini motive, also from A. So we're back here to our A motive, and I'm here just to remind you of the B motive, this descending motive characterized by a little ornamentation here that follows roughly an arpeggio-like pattern. So the B motive is not developed much further than by offering a shorter version of it. That would be it. I hope you can see it clearly. As you see, the version here is slightly shorter. And now that we have all these elements, let's go to the first motivic tree. Okay, so here we have all that information neatly organized on one graph. We have motives A and B overlapping on this high D note, right? And then motive A shows a stretto form with a faster rhythm and an added note. It shows a duplicated form with this repeated note and a slower resolution, and an expanded form in which the durations are somehow longer, right? In turn, the duplicated form has like a child motive, the A3 apostrophe cell. I wouldn't call it even a motive, you know, just a cell derived from A3, right? And as for our motive B, well, we have reduced to ti-tararata. So like a much shorter gesture, which I called B2 compacted. Now, the analysis of what happens with motive C is a little bit more complex. So I want you to follow carefully everything I'm going to show you. And I invite you to go back to your music, which I hope you have, or at least to the outline that I did with the colors on the score, right? And try to find motive C and all its derivations. The point being that all the iterations of this motive develop or add something, and eventually they come to meet each other, all these lines of evolution. So let's see that on what I call motivic tree. Okay, so what defines motive C? Motive C, unlike most of the material we have analyzed so far, so motives A and B, has no elements of hemiola. It's a straight binary element, usually symmetrical, and it shows, first of all, in two main flavors or varieties, with the weak beats ascending or with the weak beats descending. But as you see, it's two slurred notes, two separate notes. Same two slurred notes, same two separate notes. The difference between them is, well, besides the exact intervals, is that the weak notes are ascending here and the weak notes, or the weak beats, the notes on the weak beats are descending. So, out of these two flavors, so to say, we get some developments. If to the CB, which is what I call the descending weak beat version of it, we add a tonal descending of each of the halves of the motifs, so the groups of two beats. Instead of repeating verbatim, we have it a half tone lower and then another half tone lower. We are creating a gliding down effect, which is indicated with this arrow. So you see that the CB motif is different from this one, which I dubbed CB plus gliding down. Well, exactly by the gliding down of its elements. Each element goes a half tone lower than the previous one. So we have this element, this intervallic alteration of it. Okay. On the other hand, if on the CA, or the ascending weak beat, we substitute the weak beat by a chromatic run of 16ths, something that is very characteristic as a pickup, as a standing alone pickup in tango. You may have heard that a million times and other etudes have it. Then we get this CA plus chromatic pickups. So the motion, the intervallic motion of the weak beats is still ascending, but instead of being just two notes staccato ascending, we have this chromatic motion upward, right? Fantastic. So now, if we import this element, this fifth, and use it to substitute for this slurred interval at the beginning of motif C, so we still have two notes up, but instead of being neighboring steps, we have a whole fifth, which is definitely from motif A, is an allusion to motif A. If we substitute that, we can have all these elements from CA plus chromatic pickups, so meaning the two slurred notes and the ascending chromatic figure. And in turn, if we take the gliding down that we used in CB plus gliding down, if you remember, which is right in front of you, then we have a variety of motif C that joins in itself a number of the elements that developed around this and this, via this and this. So finally, what we have here, as soon as I can clean, is this version, in which we have a CB modified, because we have this cell from motif A, plus the chromatic pickups, okay, plus the gliding down. Why the gliding down? Well, as you can see, the symmetrical halves of this motif go tonally down. We start in G, and then we have the F sharp. Okay, and finally, after this development, we get to use this in its more original tango form as a standalone chromatic pickup, but in this occasion connected with the motif A. So now you see the ambiguity created by the use of this element here, because this pickup into A sounds essentially identical to this chromatic pickup into, well, what I called in this very long way, CB modified plus chromatic pickups plus gliding down. I warned you that this will be a little bit more involved in analysis, but please notice that all this can seldom be just coincidence. And if it is, it's a tribute to the incredible inspiration and intuition of Piazzolla. This has a very tight logic. There is a lot of economy in this motivic network of relationships and added elements and parallel elements. So in that regard, Motive C is a very rich one. And as I said, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes analyzing it. Beyond motives A, B, and C in other varieties, motives that define the core of this etude, there are two other elements that I also labeled as motives, although they don't receive the kind of detailed development that the other motives, particularly A and C, do. However, they are very characteristic. The first of them is motive D, and motive D is just a collection of scales. They appear 4 times, and motive D is used to wrap up certain sections or connections between sections, or to enrich or expand certain sections. This is, by the way, something that we can observe in other etudes as well. Now, the other element or motive is motive E, which appears 2 times. This is the first iteration of motive E, therefore I named it motive E1. Motive E is an arpeggio motive, and it's characterized by an overall ascending motion, but the tonal centers, as you look into the tonalities, they go down, as it indicated by the green arrow. So you can see, if you briefly look into the pitch collections, that we have E flat minor, D minor, C sharp minor, and C major. So the tonics are going down while the arpeggio goes up. Both motives E, both one and the next one, number 2, that we will see in a second, they finish their respective sections A and A apostrophe. That would be E2, which we will see right now. So here we have motive E2, which ends section A prima, if you go to the outlines that I provided. And you can see that it's a little bit more extensive than E1. It starts essentially identically. Here we change to C minor. Remember that at this point we had there was a slightly different pitch set here, and then here we ended somewhere like this, right? With this long G up there. But here we keep within the minor tonality, and we go at the very least 2 more steps, B minor and B flat minor. When we reach this point, we have incomplete chords. We have a hint to A, and if we were to follow the tonal inertia of this progression, we would be inclined to hear an A minor here, but there is no C natural, so there is no C at all, not even C sharp. Same applies here, and then out of the blue we have these 2 notes. So these are incomplete chords. And this is not the first or the last time. You may remember in Etude, which one was that? Number 2, the central section of Etude number 2, that we had this long G sharp section going into a tristement, a B minor, and then it started fading into pitch collections that were in fourth or fifth, and there was no defined tonality. So this seems to be a constant in Piazzolla. He establishes a tonality, then he blurs it by a quick succession of chords, parallel chords, or ambiguous tonalities, and leads to things that are not a tonality at all. However, the final statement, A flat, A natural, if you were to read this as a G sharp, it has a strong connotation of dominant tonic in A minor. So at least there is a hint to a final resolution into the tonality of A minor, which is the tonality, the central tonality of this piece. Well, let me move this a little bit. Here, where I really had every intention of making this video among the shortest, but apparently I hit the 30-minute mark anyway. So here we are. There are just a couple of things I wanted to show you before saying goodbye for the day. One is my proposed fingerings and bowings for the two arpeggios. That they are a little bit of a source of problems for many violinists. You should be seeing the first one now on screen. This is the fingering I do. As you see, I try to go with just one big shift, and that's it. So I would rather have one big shift and then multiple shifts that add uncertainty to the intonation. Regarding the second arpeggio, which is the longer, as you can see, what I do is I use in a couple of occasions the empty E string to relocate my hand, and that's how I reach the top. So additionally, I just wanted to briefly show you on the violin how to play some of the motives. Main motive A and B. Main motive C, A. Here you have one of the combined motives, and note the retake at the beginning of the 16. Slow. Okay. Then we have motive C, but in descending. The stretto motive A. In combination with the motive C. Okay. The extended motive A. And that goes also in the big section B to the B flat. Okay. Well, I won't try to demonstrate the arpeggios because I may fail with some of them, and I don't want to do 300 attempts, but at least I gave you the fingerings. So as always, we need to keep in mind the slurs that need to be shortened. Always the awareness of what notes are up, and not just bow up, but up in the sense of leaving the instrument, and which ones are down. Please notice that the main cell of motive A have this accent at the end, which has this sort of a little bit of a surly intention to it, okay? And then, as pretty much everywhere in this edition of the Etudes, we're lacking proper bowings, At this point, I trust that our tangueros have a good idea. For example, the second bar is lacking the proper slurs. Obviously, we need to hook here and retake. This is going to be it for today. This is the last to the end video. The next one, which I definitely need to do within the next 2 weeks, because after that, my university teaching and hopefully touring and concertizing begin again, if the present health situation improves somehow. So I absolutely need to finish this series in the next 2 weeks. So everybody stay healthy, stay positive, stay active, and see you soon at the Drago's Tango Alley.